The mountain observatory stood silent against the star-filled Colorado sky as James Harrison adjusted his telescope settings. Another quiet night of stellar observation stretched before him, just as he preferred it. The 32-year-old astrophysicist had chosen this remote posting specifically for its solitude, away from the chaos of bustling research centers and universities. A brilliant flash of light streaked across his field of view, breaking his concentration. James pulled away from the telescope, watching as the object cut through the atmosphere at an impossible angle. This was no meteor, its trajectory was too controlled, too deliberate. His heart raced as he tracked its descent, watching it disappear behind the pine-covered ridge 3 miles from his position. Without hesitation, James grabbed his emergency pack and keys. Years of research into potential extraterrestrial life had prepared him for this moment, though he never truly expected it to come. The drive along the winding mountain road seemed endless, his headlights cutting through the darkness as his mind raced with possibilities. He found the crash site easily enough, the glow of strange, silvery fire illuminated the small clearing. The object was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a sleek, crystalline vessel about the size of a small plane, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly iridescence. Heat waves distorted the air around it, but there was no smoke, no conventional fire. James approached cautiously, his scientific training warring with his survival instincts. A section of the hull had split open, revealing a glimpse of the interior. That's when he heard it, a soft moan of pain, distinctly feminine despite its alien timbre. Inside, he found her. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin had a subtle, silvery sheen, and delicate, luminescent markings traced patterns across her face and exposed arms. She was trapped beneath a section of twisted metal, obviously injured but conscious. Their eyes met, hers were a striking violet, with pupils that seemed to shift like liquid mercury. She spoke, her words incomprehensible but her tone urgent. James raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I want to help," he said slowly, pointing to himself and then to her trapped form. "Let me help you." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Working carefully, James managed to lift the debris enough for her to pull herself free. She stumbled as she tried to stand, and he caught her reflexively. The contact sent a strange tingling sensation through his arms, like a gentle electric current. A distant sound of helicopters broke the moment. The alien woman tensed, her expression turning to one of fear. James knew he had to make a decision. Government agencies would be arriving soon, drawn by whatever sensors had detected the crash. He'd read enough classified documents during his NASA consulting days to know what would likely happen to her if she was discovered. "Come with me," he said, miming walking with his fingers. "I can hide you, keep you safe until you heal." She glanced at the approaching sound, then back at him. Something passed between them in that moment, a foundation of trust born of desperation and necessity. She nodded again, and James helped her to his vehicle. They made it back to the observatory just as the helicopters began circling the crash site. James led her to the facility's small medical bay, normally used for minor emergencies. As he helped her onto the examination table, she placed a hand on his chest and spoke again. This time, her words seemed to shift, transforming into something he could almost understand. "Venna," she said, touching her own chest. "I am Venna." "James," he replied, mimicking her gesture. "James Harrison." She smiled slightly, despite her obvious pain. "James," she repeated, the name carrying a musical quality in her accent. Then her expression grew serious. "Danger," she managed in English. "Must hide." As James gathered medical supplies, his mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why had she crashed? And most importantly, what would happen when her people came looking for her? One thing was certain, his life of peaceful solitude had just become considerably more complicated. He cleaned and bandaged her visible wounds, noting that her blood had an opalescent quality to it. Venna remained stoic throughout the process, though he could tell she was in considerable pain. When he finished, she caught his hand, her touch sending that same electric tingle through his skin. "Thank you," she said carefully, the words clearly newly learned. James nodded, realizing he had just become part of something much larger than himself. As he watched Venna drift into an exhausted sleep, he knew his decision to help her would have consequences he couldn't yet imagine. The night sky outside seemed different now, knowing with certainty that we weren't alone in the universe, and that one of its mysteries was now under his protection. The next few days would prove crucial for both of them. James would need to keep Venna hidden while helping her recover, all while maintaining his regular duties to avoid suspicion. But as he watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest, he knew he'd made the right choice. Sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as impossible decisions, and this was one of them. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, love, and the vast expanse of space that separated worlds, but no longer separated hearts. Dawn broke over the mountains, casting long shadows across the observatory grounds. James hadn't slept, too busy monitoring both Venna's condition and the increased military activity in the area. Through the facility's security cameras, he'd watched numerous vehicles pass by on the mountain road, all heading toward the crash site. Venna's recovery surprised him. Her wounds were healing at an remarkable rate, the silvery markings on her skin seeming to pulse with internal energy. She'd also begun picking up English with astonishing speed, though some concepts still eluded her. "My people," she said that morning, sitting up in the medical bay. "They will come." James handed her a cup of water. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Venna's expression darkened. "Both. I am important. Daughter of the High Council." "A politician's daughter?" James guessed, but Venna shook her head. "More. I am." She struggled with the word, then touched the markings on her face. "These mean royal blood. I am to lead, one day." James sat down heavily. He'd been harboring an alien princess. The revelation should have terrified him, but instead, he found himself more intrigued by the way her markings shimmed when she spoke of home. "Why were you alone in that ship?" he asked. Venna's violet eyes met his. "Not alone. Others did not survive." Her voice cracked slightly. "We were running." "Running from what?" Before she could answer, an alarm blared from James's computer. Someone was approaching the observatory. James quickly helped Venna to her feet, leading her to a hidden storage room he'd prepared. "Stay quiet," he whispered, closing the door just as heavy knocks echoed through the facility. Two military officers stood outside, their expressions stern. "Dr. Harrison?" "I'm Colonel Richards, and this is Major Foster. We need to ask you some questions about unusual activity in the area." James kept his expression neutral, grateful for years of practicing poker faces during faculty meetings. "Of course. Come in." The questioning lasted an hour. James stuck to the truth as much as possible. Yes, he'd seen something crash, but no, he hadn't investigated because he'd assumed it was a military exercise. The officers seemed satisfied, though their eyes lingered on certain corners of the room too long for comfort. After they left, James waited 30 minutes before retrieving Venna. He found her examining the room's contents with curious interest. "Your world," she said, holding up an old astronomy magazine, "it's so young. Yet you dream so big." She pointed to an article about deep space exploration. "We're curious by nature," James replied, taking the magazine. "Sometimes too curious for our own good." Venna's expression grew serious. "James, I must tell you something. My presence here, it could bring war." The weight of her words hung in the air. Venna explained how her people, the Stellari, were divided. The dominant faction sought to colonize Earth, viewing humans as primitive beings needing guidance. A smaller group, including Vena's family, advocated for peaceful contact and cultural exchange. "I discovered proof," she said, her English improving by the hour, "that the war faction plans to provoke conflict. Make humans strike first, justify invasion." She touched her temple. "The proof is here, in my memories. That's why they tried to stop my ship. Why others died protecting me." James processed this information, his scientific mind racing with implications. "That's why you can't go back yet. And why you can't turn yourself over to our authorities, they might do exactly what your enemies want." Vena nodded, then winced, touching her side. Despite her rapid healing, some injuries lingered. James instinctively reached out, his hand covering hers. That familiar electric tingle passed between them, but this time it felt different, warmer, more intimate. "I will understand," Vena said softly, "if you wish me to leave. I bring great risk to you." James surprised himself with how quickly he responded. "No. You're staying. We'll figure this out together." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Here they were, two beings from different worlds, brought together by chance and circumstance, now facing a challenge that could affect both their civilizations. The moment was interrupted by another alarm, but this one was different. James rushed to his telescope controls, adjusting the instruments. High above Earth, multiple objects had just emerged from what appeared to be a fold in space itself. "They're here," Vena whispered, her markings pulsing with anxiety. "The Stellari fleet." James watched the objects move into Earth orbit, knowing that somewhere in the Pentagon, alarms would be blaring. Humanity's first official contact with alien life was about to begin, and he was harboring a key player in the drama about to unfold. He felt Vena's hand slip into his, her touch both alien and somehow perfectly natural. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The fate of two worlds might depend on it. As night fell over the observatory, military jets began filling the sky, and strange lights appeared among the stars. The next few days would determine whether first contact would lead to peace or war, and at the center of it all, an unlikely connection between two beings from different worlds continued to grow, defying the vast distances of space and the prejudices of their respective species. The world changed overnight. News channels broadcast endless footage of the Stellari ships hovering above major cities, their crystalline structures catching sunlight in breathtaking displays. Global leaders huddled in emergency sessions while military forces worldwide remained on high alert. In the observatory, James and Vena watched it all unfold on multiple screens. Her markings had grown dimmer with worry as she translated the Stellari messages being broadcast globally. "They demand my return," she said, her voice tight. "They claim I was kidnapped by human forces, that I must be rescued." She turned to James, her violet eyes intense. "They twist truth to serve their purpose." James ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Can't you just tell everyone the truth? Reveal their real plans?" "Not so simple," Vena replied. "The war faction controls communications now. Any message I send would be intercepted, twisted." She touched the markings on her face, which pulsed with frustration. "And your leaders, would they believe an alien over their own kind?" Her words proved prophetic when James's secure phone, a remnant from his NASA days, buzzed. The message was from Dr. Russell Lambert, his former supervisor and mentor. "Turn on CNN now." They did, and James felt his blood run cold. A prominent government scientist was giving a press conference, revealing classified documents about a secret military operation to capture alien technology. The scientist claimed that the U.S. had shot down Vena's ship, proving the Stellari's accusations. "That's a lie," James growled. "I saw your crash. There were no military forces involved." This scientist, Venna studied the screen, he speaks with false confidence. I sense something wrong. James looked closer at his old colleague on screen. That's Dr. William Nash. He always opposed any peaceful contact protocols we developed at NASA. Said humanity needed to establish dominance first. His eyes widened. He's working with them, isn't he? With your war faction? Venna nodded slowly. Such alliances are their method. Find those who fear difference, who crave power. Offer them authority in exchange for cooperation. Her expression hardened. On my world, many were seduced this way. A sudden explosion of light outside sent them rushing to the windows. High above, something had detonated in orbit, and one of the Stellari ships was moving erratically, trailing crystalline debris. No, Venna whispered. They would not dare. More explosions followed. On TV, breaking news reported that Earth forces had launched an unprovoked attack on the Stellari fleet. But James noticed something odd about the footage. Those aren't our missiles, he said, pointing to the screen. The propulsion signature is all wrong. He turned to Venna. They're attacking themselves, aren't they? Creating their excuse for war? Before she could answer, the observatory's lights went out. Emergency power kicked in as James's security systems detected multiple vehicles approaching. We have to go, he said, grabbing the emergency bags he'd prepared. They must have tracked my call with Lambert. Venna touched his arm, sending that familiar electric tingle through him. James, I cannot ask you to run. You would lose everything. He caught her hand, holding it tight. I lost everything the moment I chose to help you. And I'd do it again. Their eyes met in the dim emergency lighting, and for a moment, the chaos outside faded away. Then something heavy slammed against the observatory's main door. They ran for the back exit, emerging into the cool mountain night. James led them to a hidden trail he used for maintenance checks, just as flashlights began sweeping the area. Stop right there, Dr. Harrison. A familiar voice called out. Dr. Nash himself had come to collect their prize. They ran deeper into the forest, the sound of pursuit close behind. Venna stumbled, her old injuries slowing her down. Without hesitation, James scooped her up, surprised by how light she felt in his arms. Her markings glowed brighter at his touch, illuminating their path. The mountains, she whispered in his ear. I can call for help, but I need height. Distance from their jammers. James nodded, adjusting his course toward a cliff face he knew well. Behind them, voices shouted and dogs barked. Above, more explosions lit up the night sky as the false battle continued. They reached the cliff just as the first shots rang out, bullets splintering trees around them. James set Venna down behind a boulder and pulled out his own surprise, a small pistol he'd hoped never to use. Get to the top, he told her. I'll hold them off. Venna caught his face between her hands, her touch sending waves of that electric sensation through him. Together, she said firmly. We go together. In that moment, as searchlights swept closer and the world teetered on the brink of war, James realized something that should have terrified him but instead filled him with certainty: he was falling in love with her. A helicopter appeared overhead, its spotlight pinning them in place. Dr. Nash's voice boomed from a loudspeaker, demanding their surrender. But as James and Venna pressed close together behind their meager cover, they both knew surrender wasn't an option. Too much was at stake, not just their lives, but the future of both their worlds. Venna's markings began to pulse with increasing intensity, and she looked at James with determination. Trust me, she whispered, taking his hand. As the soldiers closed in and the helicopter descended, she pulled him close and did something that would change everything: she kissed him. The world exploded in light. As their lips met, Venna's markings blazed like captured stars, sending waves of energy pulsing outward. The helicopter's electronics failed instantly, sending it into an emergency landing. The soldiers' weapons and communications devices sparked and died. In that moment of chaos, Venna broke the kiss and pressed something into James's hand, a small crystalline device humming with energy. "Now we can communicate with the truth seekers," she said, her voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. The kiss, it created a quantum bond. My people's most sacred connection. James could still feel the tingling sensation of her lips, stronger than any touch before. "You mean that was a marriage, by my people's oldest laws?" Her violet eyes met his. "I am sorry I did not ask first, but we needed the power surge. And..." She touched his face gently, "My heart had already chosen." Before James could respond, shouts from below reminded them of their situation. They scrambled up the cliff face as the soldiers struggled with their dead equipment. The crystalline device in James's hand pulsed in sync with Venna's markings, growing warmer. They reached the summit under a sky ablaze with false battle. Venna held the device up, her markings glowing brighter. To all who seek truth, she began speaking in her native tongue, the device translating her words into all Earth's major languages and broadcasting them on frequencies that couldn't be jammed. "I am Princess Venna of the Stellari High Council, and I bring warning of betrayal." Her message was brief but powerful, revealing the war faction's plot and their Earth collaborators. She showed stored memories through the device, secret meetings, planned attacks, the orchestrated violence above their heads. "The choice of peace or war should belong to all our peoples," she concluded, "not to those who would profit from conflict." The response was immediate. Several Stellari ships broke formation, their crystalline structures glowing with different colors, supporters of Venna's faction revealing themselves. On Earth, social media exploded with her message despite attempts to block it. But the war faction wasn't finished. The ground shook as multiple transport ships descended around the mountain. Dr. Nash's voice boomed from powerful speakers. How touching, the alien princess and the Earth scientist, trying to stop the inevitable. His voice dripped with contempt. "Did you really think we hadn't planned for this? Your little rebellion ends now." Armored figures emerged from the transports, Stellari warriors loyal to the war faction, their crystalline armor making them look like walking jewels of death. They were joined by human special forces in advanced combat gear. "Your father sends his regards, Princess," Nash called out. "He wanted you to know that your betrayal forced his hand. After we take you back, he'll have no choice but to support our cause." Venna's markings dimmed with pain, but her voice remained strong. "My father is a prisoner then. One more truth you tried to hide." James gripped her hand tighter, the quantum bond between them humming with shared emotion. "We're not beaten yet," he whispered. Looking up, he saw more Stellari ships descending, but these bore the colors of Venna's supporters. "No," she agreed, "we are not." The night erupted into chaos. Loyal Stellari forces clashed with the war faction while human military units, now aware of the deception, turned on Nash's corrupt special forces. James and Venna found themselves at the heart of the storm, running and fighting as their unlikely alliance of truth-seekers battled those who would force war upon two worlds. They made their way through the combat, the quantum bond allowing them to move in perfect sync. When James stumbled, Venna pulled him to safety. When Stellari warriors cornered her, James used his knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver them. "The device," Venna shouted over the noise of battle, "it can do more than broadcast. If we can reach the main transport ship, I can access their network. Show everyone the full truth." James looked at the heavily guarded ship, its crystalline surface reflecting the firefight around them. "Then that's where we're going." They fought their way closer, gathering allies as Venna's broadcast continued to sway both humans and Stellari. The quantum bond between them grew stronger, letting them share thoughts and feelings with increasing clarity. James felt Venna's love for her people, her determination to prevent war, and, growing stronger every moment, her feelings for him. Through her, he understood that the quantum bond couldn't be forced, it only worked with true connection. What had started as a tactical decision had been possible only because their hearts were already aligned. In the middle of chaos, surrounded by the future of two worlds hanging in the balance, they had found something real. They reached the transport ship's entrance, but Dr. Nash was waiting. He held a strange crystalline weapon, its core pulsing with deadly energy. "I studied their technology for years," he snarled. "Did you think I wouldn't have a contingency?" The weapon fired, and time seemed to slow. James saw the blast coming and knew instantly what he had to do. Through their bond, Venna felt his intention and screamed, "No!" But he was already moving, pushing her clear of the blast. The last thing he saw was her face, markings blazing with desperation and love, as the crystalline energy engulfed him. The crystalline energy surrounded James, but instead of pain, he felt warmth. Venna's markings blazed like a supernova, the quantum bond between them surging with power. The blast that should have destroyed him instead flowed through their connection, transforming into pure light that surrounded them both. "Impossible," Nash gasped, stumbling backward. "The weapon should have killed a human." "Yes," Venna's voice rang with authority. "But James is no longer just human. The quantum bond we share has changed him, as it has changed me. We are something new." James stood, his skin now shimmering with faint markings of his own, not quite like Venna's, but an echo of them, tracing patterns of starlight across his flesh. He could feel the power of their connection, stronger than ever, rewriting the very essence of what he was. "The ancient prophecies," one of the nearby Stellari warriors whispered, lowering his weapon. "The bridge between stars." More warriors stepped back, recognition and awe in their postures. Even Nash's human forces hesitated, sensing that something profound had occurred. Through their bond, Venna shared the knowledge with James, an ancient Stellari legend of two beings from different worlds whose love would transform them both, marking the beginning of a new era of unity. "Enough." Nash raised the weapon again, his face contorted with rage. "Prophecies and fairy tales won't stop progress. Earth needs this war to advance, to take our rightful place among the stars." "No," James stepped forward, Venna moving in perfect sync beside him. "Earth needs understanding. Growth. Connection." He reached out, the quantum energy flowing through him interfacing with the ship's crystalline structure. "And now everyone will see the truth." The transport ship's systems responded to their combined will. Screens flickered to life across Earth and in every Stellari vessel, showing not just Venna's memories, but the combined perspective of their shared consciousness. Every secret meeting, every betrayal, every moment of Nash's conspiracy played out for all to see. More importantly, they shared their own story, the trust, the growing love, the proof that humans and Stellari could not only coexist but transform each other for the better. Their quantum bond became a bridge, showing both species the potential that lay in understanding rather than fear. Nash fired the weapon again, but this time the blast dissipated harmlessly against their combined energy. Stellari warriors loyal to the war faction began laying down their weapons as the truth spread. Human forces surrounded Nash and his remaining supporters. Above, the false battle ceased as ships from both factions responded to the revelation. The war faction's leadership was exposed and detained. Communications flooded in from Earth governments and the Stellari High Council, all demanding immediate peaceful negotiations. "Father," Venna whispered, sensing a familiar presence among the incoming transmissions. Through their bond, James felt her joy at confirming that the High Council leader had indeed been imprisoned and was now free. As the chaos settled, James and Venna stood together on the mountain peak, their markings glowing in harmony under the dawn sky. Earth forces and Stellari representatives approached, no longer as enemies but as witnesses to something unprecedented. "The quantum bond you share," Venna's father's voice came through their communicator, "it is a sign that cannot be ignored. Our peoples were meant to find each other, to grow together. In the days that followed, their unique connection became the foundation for a new kind of diplomacy. The High Council and Earth's United Nations established a joint committee for peaceful integration and cultural exchange. Nash and his conspirators faced justice in both human and stellari courts. James and Venna became living symbols of unity, their evolved forms demonstrating the potential that lay in embracing difference rather than fearing it. Their love had quite literally changed them both, making them something entirely new, a bridge between worlds. One evening, as they stood at the observatory where it had all begun, Venna traced the starlight patterns that now marked James's skin. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Becoming something other than fully human?" James caught her hand, feeling the familiar electric tingle of their connection. "How could I regret becoming more?" He smiled, looking up at the stars that no longer seemed so distant. "Besides, I'm still me. Just expanded." Venna's markings pulsed with happiness. "We are something new," she agreed. "Not human, not stellari, but a promise of what could be." Above them, ships from both worlds moved peacefully through the night sky. Teams of human and stellari scientists worked together in new orbital stations, exploring the possibilities their combined knowledge could achieve. On Earth, the first cultural exchange centers were opening, while on Venna's world, humans were being welcomed to learn and share. "They call us the bridge," James mused, holding her close. "But really, we just showed them what was possible when you choose trust over fear, love over power." "And now?" Venna's violet eyes met his, sparkling with mischief and love. "Now we keep building bridges." He kissed her, their markings blazing in harmony, lighting up the night with the promise of a future neither of their worlds could have imagined alone. In the end, it hadn't taken armies or weapons to prevent a war. It had taken two hearts brave enough to trust, to love across the vast distances of space and culture. Their story became legend among both species, proof that the greatest power in the universe wasn't technology or military might, but the simple, profound courage to reach across the darkness and take someone's hand. As James and Venna looked to the stars, now filled with possibilities instead of threats, they knew their journey was just beginning. Together, they had become something entirely new, not an ending, but a bright and shining beginning for both their worlds.